Okay, welcome back to High Cheese with Darren Maloney. It'll be an exciting year on the Supreme Court, with several high-profile cases being decided sometime in 2022, likely in June. To me, there is the big four: the Mississippi abortion case, the New York Second Amendment case with the New York Rifle and Pistol Association v. Bruin, deciding whether New York residents have a right to concealed carry, affirmative action with Students for Fair Admissions v. Harvard, which will decide whether Asian Americans have been discriminated against by Harvard University admissions when favoring essentially African American admission candidates over Asians. Then there is Carson v. Mackin, which will decide whether Maine's tuition assistance program funds can be used for schools that provide religious instruction. But there are two additional important cases that are flying just under the radar that are important. One is Becerra v. Empire Health Foundation, and the other is the American Hospital Association v. Becerra. There is a third case, West Virginia v. EPA, but I think that has yet to be argued. But let's just focus on the Empire Health case. Empire will decide whether the federal bureaucracy could essentially make law in a fashion contrary to what the federal courts have already determined can't be done. A victory for us in the Empire Health Foundation case and against the federal bureaucracy could be a first step in whittling the power that these unelected and unaccountable federal bureaucrats have over our lives. Let me talk for a moment about the administrative state. The administrative state is a powerful group of unelected federal bureaucrats that manage and operate the many federal agencies that impact our lives. They are rarely accountable to the American people, but have great influence. Internal procedures, which on many occasions include hiring their own administrative judges to rubber stamp the rules and regulations these bureaucrats make, again, which have a profound impact on us. This process is undemocratic and leaves room for corruption, as these rules and regulations are made in the dark corners of our federal buildings with little provided for the American public to see or the federal court system to review. I also blame the federal court system for this, but I'll explain later. Just a little history on the rise of the administrative state. Although most people think that the federal bureaucracy started under FDR, it actually started growing in the early 1900s under President Teddy Roosevelt and later Woodrow Wilson. It just took off under FDR's New Deal and continued to grow ever since. And it's not just a vast amount of tax dollars being spent on the federal bureaucracy that's scary. It's also the laws they create through the backdoor process of creating these regulations. These bureaucratic rules, proposed rules, and notices are printed in a daily newspaper called the Federal Register, which is published 5 days per week. Doesn't it feel a bit odd that a daily newspaper is needed to print out the enormous amount of rules regulating our lives by a group of non-elected bureaucrats? It's just so strange. To put this in a little more perspective on how we are overregulated, let me quote a section from the website Ballotpedia. I quote, "In 1936, the first year of publication, the Federal Register contained a total of 2,620 pages. By contrast, 61,950 pages were added in 2017. In April 2018, the Government Publishing Office announced that it had digitized every issue of the Federal Register from 1936 to 1994, when the government began publishing the paper in both digital and print forms. The GPO digitized 14,587 daily issues of the Federal Register, totaling nearly 2 million pages. This is out of control. So occasionally, these rules are challenged by an aggrieved party, and their cases meander through the federal court system and sometimes make it to the Supreme Court. The Empire Health case is one of those. However, many prior decisions by the federal court system, which have allowed federal bureaucracies to make their own rules without federal judicial review, to date, have followed a concept called judicial deference. Under judicial deference, the federal court system yields its judicial authority to the federal bureaucracy and their administrative judges when determining the constitutionality of an interpretation of a rule or regulation. As a result, our federal bureaucracy makes up the rules and essentially law with little accountability. However, the Becerra v. Empire Health Foundation case may be the first step into changing judicial deference. In a nutshell, the case involves whether the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, which controls Medicare and controls Medicare reimbursement to hospitals, can change the formula it uses to reimburse hospitals, even though the federal courts had previously determined that this formula cannot be changed. HAS is thumbing its nose at us and the courts by arbitrarily changing the formula after the courts have already determined that the formula can't be changed. Let's hope Empire wins. Becerra is a familiar name. He is the head of the HAS, while Empire Health is the aggrieved party. We should get a ruling on this sometime in June or later. Now, speaking of the Supreme Court, Stephen Breyer announced that he's retiring this week. Now, I read a couple things into this. The first thing I read into this is that he sees the writing on the wall. He knows that the Republicans are going to take back the Senate later this year. And he knows that once that happens, his replacement will not be a liberal Dem. And what bothers me is that these justices on the Democratic side are just political people, a pure political decision. And that's what all this decision is for Breyer to stand down, is to make sure that another liberal Dem gets on board. And it does, again, this does disappoint me. And the entire judicial system is in question, particularly over the last, say, 15, 20 years of appointments in the federal court system. And it is problematic. And I'm talking about up to Donald Trump. Donald Trump came in, and I'm so happy that the Democrats were so confident that with Hillary Clinton winning 2016, that they never bothered to fill a bunch of federal court judge positions. And I think Trump came in and had the opportunity to fill 300 court position judges because Obama had left them vacant because he wanted Hillary to fill them. Not too bright, Mr. Obama. So anyway, when I was younger, I thought that everything was legitimate. I thought the court system was legitimate. I thought judges were legitimate. And as I said in my last episode, I spent about 20 years down in Hudson County. And I came across a number of political operatives and elected officials that were brilliant politically, but they were corrupt. One in particular, I will call him Pete, and I don't want to name his name right now because he had passed away, and he comes from a wonderful Irish family. So Pete and I rubbed elbows, and he would often joke with me and say, "Hey, Darren, this stuff is not legitimate. You think this stuff is legitimate. It's not legitimate." So he went on to tell me a story about his appearance before a grand jury regarding David Friedland. Now, Pete was a close confidant of David Friedland, and I'll get into David Friedland later, but David Friedland essentially was a state senator that was convicted of a crime and went on the lam for a couple of years between his conviction and sentencing. So again, getting back to Pete was a close advisor, and Pete got hauled into a grand jury regarding David Friedland. And he was telling me, sitting there in front of the grand jury, and the U.S. attorney says, "Well, isn't it true, Pete? Isn't it true, Mr. Pete, that nothing happens in Hudson County without the politics involved?" And Pete turned around and looked at him and said, "Hey, pal, how do you think your boss got his job? Because he was a nice guy?" And apparently all hell broke loose, going to hold him in contempt. And, he was telling me that in the grand jury, your attorney is not allowed to be in the room while you're being examined by the U.S. attorney. So his attorney told him later, said, "Oh, I heard all this commotion. I thought, what the hell happened? What were they doing?" And anyway, to make a long story short, much as Pete was, corrupt, he opened the curtains on the judicial system right then and there, and they didn't like it, and they didn't like it at all. But from that point on, I always looked at the judicial system through a different set of glasses. And then later on, my experience dealing with workers' compensation judges and other judges, I just found out that a lot of these judges are there and they have their own political agenda. And I don't think that's right. That's what happened. And, again, it's disappointing. You think that everybody is legit, but they're not. And you think that people on the Supreme Court are legit. And most of the time, Well, I take that back. A lot of the times they're just, political hacks. It's shameful to say it, but it's terrible. So, and what does Joe Biden do? He says, and he's already committing, I'm going to nominate an African-American woman. And I just think that is a big problem. I think it does two things. One is, well, what's wrong with African-American males? Don't they matter? How about Asian Americans? Don't Asian Americans matter? Why don't you look at an Asian American? And this is the problem. It's all about race with the Democrats. And not only that, when you commit yourself to just one group of people, you're casting doubt on whether you're getting the best candidate, because you really want to draw from the largest group of people that you can, and you just don't want to limit it to one race. Now, do you think that Clarence Thomas was nominated from a pool of just African Americans? No. And Clarence Thomas is the smartest guy in the Supreme Court. So let me go to a clip. I think it's Fox News, Leo Terrell, then we'll get back to this.
And the comment to pick a black female is racist. It's the number one reason why I left the Democratic Party, because 2 years ago, Joe Biden said, if you vote for Trump, you ain't black. The Democrats, the left wing, have divided this country, Sean. You say they play it every election cycle. They're playing it 24/7. And one final point. This is not going to convince black people to vote for Joe Biden and the Democrats. We hate crime. We want crime eliminated. We hate these federal mandates. We want the homeless problem done. We want school choice. That's what black people want.
Well, there you have it, Leo. He hit the nail right on the head. For blacks, it's a patronizing decision, and ultimately they don't care. It really is. It's just a patronizing decision for blacks, especially black men. I mean, even if you buy into this whole Democratic thing about the Democrats need to protect black people, or you know what? The black man has been left out, and it's been left out again with this decision. So, Leo, you're right. African Americans, they'll see through this, and what's important are a bunch of other things, and not having an extremely left-wing African-American nominated, which I think is going to happen. And unfortunately for the Democrats, this is what everything they do is all about. They're looking for the photo op. Biden's going to nominate an extremely liberal candidate. And they're going to show clips in the election that, oh, look at this Republican. Republicans don't like black people. They don't like black women because they're questioning a black candidate for the Supreme Court, or a black nominee for the Supreme Court. And that's all they're looking to do. And African Americans have been used by the Democratic Party over all these years. And this is just another opportunity to use the African American. And again, I do think African American men are starting to get it. Let me just turn to David Friedland. I had mentioned David Friedland before when I was talking about Pete's excursion into the grand jury. David Friedland was a senator from Jersey City, New Jersey State Senator from Jersey City, 78 to 80, I think. And during that time, he was convicted of essentially he was convicted of taking bribes to facilitate like a $4 or $5 million loan from the Teamsters Pension Fund from, I think it was the New Brunswick local. So anyway, make a long story short, he was convicted. He appealed it. And what he did is during the time of his appeal, what he did is he cut a deal with the feds, and he said, okay, listen, I'll wear a wire. I'll give you as much information on people that I know in order to help you put them in jail. Or if you have any investigations, I'll help you with any investigations. So essentially what he did is he offered his services to the Fed in hopes of getting a lesser sentence. And during that time, two things happened. The first thing is that during the time he was supposed to be working with the feds, he was bribing people, and I think it was members of the same Teamster local where he was looking to facilitate a loan, but he was bribing people to get business for the pension fund. So essentially what he did is he bribed, I don't know the individual that he bribed, but I guess it was a representative of the Teamsters local pension, and he bribed them to put these high-risk investments into the Teamsters pension fund. And I think it was $20 million, and ultimately the pension fund lost $4.5 million on the transaction. And this was all done while he was supposed to be working with the feds. So anyway, apparently his sentencing was coming up, and he went on the lam. He took a trip to the Bahamas, went out apparently on a boat on a scuba dive, and he disappeared. And he became a fugitive. And apparently he was tracked through Paris, I think Africa, several different countries. But he ultimately landed in the Maldives, where he opened up a shop, a scuba shop. And he was caught, and he went to jail. And I think he's still alive today. I think he's out of jail, but I think he's still alive. But he was always looking to cut deals. Even when he was in jail, he was looking to cut deals. He was going to narc on the other inmates and gather information for them. And I think he was just always looking for an angle. And he was actually a very bright guy. When he was 26 years old, he won a case before the New Jersey Supreme Court. And from what I hear, he was a pleasant guy. He just bribed people. Now, Pete always mentioned, and I don't know if this is true, but rented an apartment or lived with Friedland somewhere, or he spent a lot of time at Friedland's house. But he always said that Friedland kept $10,000 in cash in his freezer, and anybody could come in and use it and take it. And I guess it was a way of currying favors with local politicians that would just drop by his house. And from what I hear, there was one particular politician that always dipped into that too much, and it bothered some of the other politicians. So I don't know if that's true, but that's just what Pete had told me. So anyway, let me just take a turn to the January 6th spin by the Democrats and the media about calling this a threat against democracy. And it really ticks me off because, I look at this, it wasn't an insurrection. You think a guy wearing horns and another guy that's dressed up as Barney Rubble, do you really think these guys are going to take over the government or looking to take over the government? I don't think so. But constantly we hear, it was a threat to democracy. It was a threat. And I'm going to show you a clip right now. This is what the threat to democracy is. Hold on.
Insider information on the part of congressmen and women be a big issue, especially also at the Fed. When it comes to individuals trading on some of that information. Yesterday, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi was asked about that in her weekly press conference. Just want to play.
And secondly, should members of Congress and their spouses be banned from trading individual stocks while serving in Congress?
No, I don't know to the second one. Because this is a free market and we are a free market economy. They should be able to participate in that.
What a warped understanding of the free market. Or she's just lying to us. She fully understands it, but she's just lying to us. How could the Speaker of the House support this? It's inside information. They're trading on inside information. And Nancy Pelosi has no problem with this. And you wonder why people don't think the institutions are working for them. Now, there was another story, and I'm sure there's plenty of other ones that are going to come out, is that apparently she was involved with an IPO, I think, for Visa, and at the same time that she was overseeing legislation that would benefit Visa. Again, I think it's Visa. And she's got no problem with that. She thinks as long as you can make money in what you're doing, whether it's legal or illegal, it doesn't matter. The free market is stealing. Her attitude is the same attitude a bank robber has. Well, why did you steal from there? Well, it's there. I got no problem with that. Just very dangerous, very, very dangerous opinion we hear from the Speaker of the House. Another related article about stock trading is that we've got 3 people from the Fed. Now, this is the Fed that controls interest rates. This is the Fed that does quantitative easing. This is the Fed that has been pumping up the stock market since 2008. Well, this is taken from the Washington Times, and it just says Federal Reserve Vice Chair Richard Clarida said he will step down on Friday, and he's the 3rd Fed official to resign in the wake of a stock trading scandal. The announcement followed new revelations around Clarida's trading in a stock fund in February of 2020, when the coronavirus threatened to upend the global economy, and the Fed was discussing extraordinary measures to counter its impact. The New York Times reported that Clarida amended his financial disclosures to show that he had sold and then repurchased shares of the stock fund in a matter of days that month. The The repurchase came a day before Chair Jerome Powell said the Fed was prepared to support the markets and the economy. Clarita, and here's a funny thing, this guy was part of the inner circle of the Fed. Now, at some episode, I'll get into the Fed and how it's set up and how they do things, but this guy was part of the inner circle. So it was him, Powell, and some other individual. But this Clarita is the third person from the Fed to resign over the scandal. And what really gets me is that these people go into government and they look to profit from it. Meanwhile, when Trump was in office, he lost money. I am sure he lost money by being president. I don't think he cares. And he has billions to cover up for it. But they went after him and prevented him and made him lose money over the simplest things. I remember that I forgot Congress was up in arms, Nancy Pelosi or whoever was up in arms because there were, I think, some Arab sheiks were renting or staying at a hotel. Oh, my God. How much did it make? $10,000? Big deal. And there was nothing wrong with the sheik staying at his hotel. Meanwhile, these people are insider trading on stocks. And that's the problem with our institutions. People go into our institutions to make money, and that shouldn't be the case. People are supposed to work for government, for the good of government, and the good of the people. And we're not doing that here. And this is what challenges democracy, not January 6th. Okay, let's take a short break. Okay, welcome back to High Cheese with Darren Maloney. Just some breaking news is that we just got a report that a Pennsylvania court has declared mail-in ballots to be unconstitutional, blanket mail-in ballots. So we'll have to take a look at that in the future because does that mean that the mail-in ballots from the 2020 election were unconstitutional? And what happens then? So maybe Trump was right. Okay, let's turn to the stock market. Since the last time I saw you on Monday, the Dow finished up about 1%. NASDAQ finished down a little less than 1%, and the S&P finished up about 0.5%. Year to date, the Dow is down 4.44%. The S&P is down 7.01%, and the NASDAQ is down 11.9%. There's a lot of volatility on the market, just a lot of volatility in trading. Up 1,000, down 1,000. And, you're going to have to get used to it. This is what this is going to be like. Again, I do believe the trend is going to be downward in stocks, and I think they'll continue to get hit harder. But there'll be some up and down, and we shall see. The big items for the week, though, is the first one was the Fed chairman press conference and the Fed statement. And essentially what they said is that they were going to start raising the federal funds rate starting in March, likely. But he was less clear with how he was going to handle quantitative easing and tapering. Now, what quantitative easing is to keep interest rates low in the long term over the years. The Fed has purchased treasuries and mortgage-backed mortgages. And what that does is because of supply and demand, you create more demand, and you raise the price up of bonds, and there's an inverse relationship between bonds and yields. So yields go down. And this has been going on, I think, since 2008. And, the Fed ramped it up over the past year. But we're at the point now, I think the Fed owns more than $8 trillion of treasuries and mortgages and bills. So they're going to have to figure out how to stop the purchase so interest rates can rise. And they just weren't clear on how that was going to be done. And I'm not sure if the market took kindly to it, but at this point, it's just the market is just volatile as hell. Up 1,000, down 1,000. Expect more of it. I think you should expect more this for the entire year. And there's a lot of experts out there, and I do believe that the markets are going to continue to go down. The question is how far down will the markets go until we hit a bottom? Some people say 20%. Some people say 30%. I'm somewhere in the 20%. And again, we're talking about 20% off the highs. So we shall see, and we shall. Okay, let's take a look at crypto. Crypto finished up today, which a nice reprieve. And right now, I just think that crypto is going to continue to get beat up. There'll be some good days, but for the foreseeable future, I just don't think that crypto is going anywhere. I'm not buying any right now. I don't intend to buy any right now, but I do own some. Oh, before I forget, is that the other surprise was with the GDP. Most people expected GDP to come in at 5.5%, but it really came in hot at 6.9%. The funny thing is, one thing I just want to talk about that, again, bothers me is that the headlines that these websites have just pump up stock all the time. They just want to pump up stock all the time. And I don't think that's good. Let me just give you an example. Boeing had atrocious earnings this week. I think it was expected that they were going to lose 42 cents per share. However, it came in that they lost $7.69, $7.69 per share. Yet the headline, it says, Boeing takes $3.5 billion charge on the 787 Dreamliner, but generates positive cash flow. Well, where the heck is the earnings disaster that they had this quarter? See, again, it's just a bias that they have. I just think a lot of these CNBCs and Bloombergs are just out there to keep pumping up stocks, pump. And again, I don't think it's healthy. And this is a good example of it. Now, the headline changed later for whatever reason. But when somebody comes out with earnings that fall so far short of expectations, you're not going to write about its cash flow. Okay, let me switch to Russia. What happened this week with Russia is that the United States and NATO responded to what Russia wanted. And they essentially said, well, you're not going to get anything. So here we are. And with that said, I heard this comment about the Nord Stream 2 pipeline going from Russia to Germany. And they said, well, we'll just, U.S. Said that, we'll just shut it down, or, we just won't proceed with it. And I'm not quite sure that Putin's going to be too worried about that, in the sense that, one is that he may take an attitude, yeah, go, good, freeze for the winter. Or if you're going to buy any type of natural gas or oil, it's going to be at super inflated prices. The other thing, too, is that, and I just want to bring this up, is you go back a year or two ago, or maybe 3 years ago, when Trump was talking about this pipeline, and he was talking about NATO. And, look, NATO is essentially there to counteract Russia. And Trump's point is that, well, why the hell are we building, or why are you building a gas line between Russia and Germany, which would result in the enemy getting wealthy? That just doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. And Trump always had the position, well, just buy it from us. Now, look, there would be a transition period where you would have to, ramp up the production of natural gas. It would have to be liquefied, but there would be a period of transition. But Trump had a great point. He goes, why are we doing anything to benefit the enemy? Well, you take a look deeper into this transaction, and you'll find out that the former chancellor of Germany, Schroeder, works for Gazprom. And Gazprom is the Russian oil and gas company. When you talk about the elites and what the elites are doing to us, here's a perfect example. We've got NATO. Everybody pushes NATO. Oh, America to pay money into NATO. And meanwhile, you've got the former chancellor of Germany working for the enemy's company. This just doesn't make sense. You can't make it up. Again, I think time is going to be good to Donald Trump. So many things that people just beat him up on unnecessarily. Well, he's proven to be right, and he'll continue to prove to be right, and which is why he likely deserves a second chance. Okay, just a clarification. Schroeder works for Nord Stream 2, which is the company that is putting the pipeline together, completed the pipeline. But the company Nord Stream 2 is owned by Gazprom. Okay, let's take a break.
You have the whole nation on gridlock. And although you won't be here anymore, I want you to live through me. The system continues to fail us. We are not safe anymore. Not even the members of the service. I know you were tired of these laws, especially the ones from the new DA. I hope he's watching you speak through me right now. I'm sure all of our blue family is tired too. But I promise, we promise, that your death won't be in vain. I love you to the end of time. We'll take the watch from here.
Hi, I just had to lead with that from the break. That's the wife of Jason Rivera, eulogizing him at St. Patrick's Cathedral today. And it's just heartbreaking. But this has got to stop. We've had 2 cops killed in New York. We've had another cop in Texas. And then we've had 3 cops shot in Houston. This has just got to stop. And I blame the elected officials for this. And you have to rethink your motivations on what you are doing to the police force and what you are doing to the population, because this has got to stop. Something's got to change. Anyway, let's just switch to some better news. Up north, we've got our truckers headed to Ottawa. Thousands and thousands of truckers up in Ottawa. And the reports there as of this afternoon on Friday is that they've hit Ottawa. And it's just amazing to see what's going on up there. And I'm just interested in to see what the response is going to be up there to the locals in Parliament. And in true form, Trudeau is hiding. Now he's saying he's quarantining because he got exposed to COVID, so he's quarantining. But he's just running away in typical elite fashion. He's a weak man. He's a beta male, and I cannot wait until he's voted out of office. Now, this is what I've heard. I got reports that, those CCTV cameras that are over overpasses that, show traffic in the morning. Weathermen use it and when they talk about it. I've heard that they've been cut off because the government doesn't want people to know how big this thing is. And this thing is huge. And I hope that there are thousands and thousands and thousands of trucks that show up in Ottawa. Now, speaking to Canada, former Canadian Neil Young, he left Spotify because he didn't like what Joe Rogan was doing regarding his position on the vaccine and therapeutics. Now, I guess Neil, he's a big vaccine guy. But why should I be surprised? He's never met a drug that he didn't like. And I'm sure he took the damn vaccine because probably somebody told him he could get high off of it. But Neil Young, you're an old man, your music is old, and you are done. Okay, I want to thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it. And my email address is darrenm3225@gmail.com. If you want to email me, if you want me to cover any topics, or if you want to be a guest on the show, just let me know, and I'll get back to you. And I should have another drop early next week and another one later next week. So I hope everybody enjoys the weekend, and I shall see you soon. Thank you again.